like this. Sweet. All right. All right,
Got it.
Fatmi, they're all yours.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Excuse me. I will go ahead and introduce myself, but before that, I will go over the title of our presentation is really what it says. School Continuous Improvement Plan. What does it look like under MICIP? That was the question we asked ourselves when we first started, so we decided to present it as such. Hilda, you want to introduce yourself?
Of course. So, excuse me. Good morning, everyone. I'm Hilda Irani. I thank you for wanting to learn more about what's going on in our district in Dearborn Public Schools. This is my 28th year with the district. I'm the Director of Assessment, Research, and Evaluation. And I've been fortunate enough to work with Fatmi for many years, both as a building, administrator, and now at central office, learning from her, growing with her, and really working on that vision of what continuous improvement can look like for our schools. And so I'll let Fatmi introduce herself, give you a little bit about her history and who she is, and then we'll tell you a little bit more.
Thank you, Hilda. Yes, my name is Fatmi Faraj, and I am the Executive Director of Student Achievement in Dearborn Public Schools. Prior to that, I was the Director of School Improvement and Accountability. And before that, I served as a principal, assistant principal, coach, reading recovery specialist, and in different positions. I felt that prepared me well to serve as a school improvement at the district level, school improvement director, and also facilitator for buildings. I also oversee the district strategic plan and the COGNIA accreditation. This year, we are doing a long-term study, which is through Fielding International. It's visioning for the future of learning for the next 30 years. And this, you will see the magnitude of our district demands and needs through this presentation. It is important to put everything in context when you're talking continuous improvement. So we're gonna give you a good picture of what our district needs are and how we try to orchestrate everything we have in terms of resources and expertise to make sure that we stay focused on continuous improvement.
All right, Fatmi, if you want to go over the session outcomes.
So yes, as thank you, Hilda. As I mentioned, it is very important to know who you are and who you serve to make sure that if you're trying to figure out what is it that we're doing and how it applies to your district, you would know what the context is. Our district, in terms of size and population, it is large. We have 33 buildings, we have 39 programs, we have a lot of practices in place. Many are high impact and effective, and others that need improvement. And with the MICIP, we felt that it gave us another lens to look through and make sure that we align our practices and focus on individual schools and make sure that we are operating in systems versus in silos. That's what we hope to get today from the presentations, that to make sure that we create that mind shift, make sure that each of our district plans mirror what we are doing at the district level, because we often say to the buildings, we don't have students in the district office, we have students in the buildings, teachers are in the buildings. So the plans that we create and put together need to be implemented at the building level. And how do we facilitate this work to make sure that it is transitioning to where it's most important, the students and the teachers?
One thing that we've just really strived in the last few years is, in particular, is to make sure we have a documented process. Every system, every protocol, every initiative that we put down, we want to make sure that it's clear to not only our building leadership and our district leadership, but to our teachers. Because as with many of your districts with the high turnover rate, we want to make sure that those that come after us understand the why and then the how. And so many of the templates that you'll see today, the examples, the forms that we will share with you, you'll have access to. You'll see either blank ones or completed examples, and all of those are linked. And then if there's something that we mention in passing, please, please, please reach out to myself, to Fatmi. We want to make sure we're here to learn from each other. Like David has always said, like I've always said, this is definitely, we're all in, like Fatmi mentioned earlier, we're all in this together, and it's definitely a learning process. And so on this next slide here, oh, there we go. You will see this bit.ly link. You can use your QR code there as well if you've got your phone handy. This will take you to our dashboard, similar to something that we've set up for the collab series. You'll find today's presentation. You'll find multiple forms of everything that we're going to mention today. We have linked there because we want to make sure that it's accessible to you later on when you're trying to process all of this with your teams, as well as our contact information. So you've got email addresses there, and then what have you. So nothing is, if you miss something, please, feel free to unmute, clarify, ask. Fatmi and I are very open to that. And we'll try our best to monitor the chat as well as we go.
We are hoping that as we go along through the presentation, you do stop us and ask questions. That's the only way you get clarifications. And also, we make it clear to our stakeholders, and these include principals and teachers, leadership teams, in terms of the work that we are implementing. Of course, our stakeholders include parents and students, but we make sure that our documents are living documents. So we collect feedback continuously, just like it's continuous improvement. Forms and templates are also continuous in terms of how we improve them based on feedback. And that happened many times through the process so far, and it will continue to happen. Again, this sets the purpose for what we do, our mission and vision. We live by the vision and the mission of our strategic plan, and we make sure it's mirrored in our MICIP process.
And one thing about, if you ever met our superintendent, Dr. Maleko, he is very proud of that vision. He lives, eats, breathes it. So he's very active on social media with our community, with the students. Love to get into to be in a picture with Dr. Maleko and the sign. And by the sign, it's that student's first sign. And you will see him at football games. You'll see him at theater events, at community events. Anytime he is out, that sign pops up and he's there. So this is something that he truly embodies and, advocates that our students do come first. And it's our why. It's why we do what we do. It's to put our, to see that our students succeed. So I think that's pretty powerful.
We branded the vision, and it is everywhere in the district. So Dearborn is the third largest in the state, third largest district in the state. Our schools vary in size as well as in age. Within the next 10 years, we'll have at least 10 buildings that are over 100 years old. And this is where Fielding International Study comes in to really paint a path for what we plan to do within the next 5 years, then within the next 10 years, 15, and so on and so forth. Making sure that learning reflects or we have the best infrastructure to support that learning.
I can talk a little bit about this. So yeah, I know Fatmi mentioned earlier about our size. So we are the third largest district in the state. Also one of the largest employers in Wayne County outside of Detroit. Given our size, it can be, it can be a little, it's got its logistical problems in terms of scope, in terms of infrastructure. Fatmi alluded to our Fielding International Study earlier, and we'll talk a little bit about that and how that's impacting the decisions that we're making, because it's not only our buildings with concerns looming in the forefront, but it's also in terms of what learning should look like in the future. Of our 39 buildings, 10 of those in the next 10 years are going to be at 100 years plus. So when you're looking at buildings that are beautiful, like our Fortson High School for one, that has, the cathedral, see in the library, you also, that, impacts how I guess it sets limitations on what our instruction can look like and what our learning can look like. So it's a good problem to have. I look at it. It's something to think about and an opportunity to take what we know needs to be and how to move it forward. All right, a couple of things here to celebrate. One is as something that we speak very highly of is our graduation rate. Just again, to give you that picture of who we are as a district. Since the last 10 years or so, our graduation rates have steadily increased, and we now have maintained that mid 90% graduation rate for our schools, and that we recognize that there are some areas of growth that still need to happen. You know, it's not all perfect here, but we know that this is something that we can definitely be proud of and always look for areas to improve upon. All right, our 5 blue ribbon schools. In addition, we strive for excellence, as many of you do as well. And in one area is the National Blue Ribbon School program that we've had 5 buildings in the last 5 years or so to receive this honor, with one of them being one of the high schools. And I know that's a big deal for it to happen because it's much more difficult to achieve with our high school level. And we continue to offer opportunities for our secondary students, with many of our students going on to colleges and universities. We also offer dual enrollment. We offer many programs that are not necessarily for our college bound, but CTE courses, things like that, that really want to give them the opportunity to be successful in whatever career path that they choose to do. A few more for Fatima. I was gonna say this one's near and dear to your heart.
So just like Hilda mentioned, we have some great practices in place, and with the MICIP process, we did not put anything on the side and moved forward with a new accountability system. And this is not what it meant to do. It's meant to create the mind shift and also refine practices, as we mentioned before. And we know that school improvement starts with comprehensive needs assessment. It is the assessed needs, plan, and then monitor and adjust for sure. So we did have a model in place where we had a continuous improvement process where we walked the buildings to really assess what practices are in place in classrooms. And we called that model the MICIP walkthrough. And if we go back to the previous slide, this specific model, we had published it in a scholarly article with the District Administration magazine. And it happened to earn the national recognition through the national recognition program, where 45 districts were recognized. And these are districts that implement practices leading the way with new ideas, innovative ideas. We were recognized for that in 2018, I believe, and we continue to implement that as part of MICIP, but of course, aligning it to the new goals, strategies, and activities. We do show growth in our district. As you've seen in previous slides, we have over 50% of our students are EL learners, English language learners, and we have a high percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged. So we are a growth district rather than a proficiency, but we strive to grow toward proficiency, making sure that we are showing an adequate amount of growth, which is what we work with our buildings on. Moving to the next slide.
So this is a little pre-MICIP, I guess, a little history of where we were.
Yeah, so we wanted to give you a brief overview of where we were prior to MICIP, as Hilda mentioned. We had pockets of systemic and high impact practices and strategies. We know that with the assist, we used to write plans, submit plans, and then go back to our business in the buildings, right? And look at those high impact strategies and try to enhance them. But they were, I don't want to say in limited pockets, that we had many of them. But I would say at the district level, we did not have systems. The one systemic practice that we had at the district level was this SIP walkthrough that we did through the buildings. And we identified learning environments. If you are familiar with the Elliott tool, this resembles the Elliott tool. We did borrow some learning environments from there, but at the same time, we took our strategic plan and we also embedded the learning environments in our strategic plan, like student engagement, like students creating their own goals, the culture and climate of the building. So there were 9 components there that we looked for. Because this practice was high impactful in our view and what we've seen in buildings, we continued with it under MICIP, and we will show you how we tweaked it to make sure that it's focused on what the goal is currently for Dearborn Public Schools, what strategies the buildings were tagged with, and also the activities. We also had another systemic practice in the district that we felt that really helped the MICIP process, which is the comprehensive needs assessment and the data presentations. And these followed specific protocols in the district. And we will go over that. So if you look at this slide, really our goal is continuous improvement at the building level, not only at the district level. We know that the district guides the building. And we figured that if we reimagined our school improvement plans to be high impactful and also implemented with integrity at the building levels, then we can see impact on student achievement, which is addressing the very real disconnect between the purpose of the plan and its actual use. Like I mentioned earlier with Assist, we had the plans, we submitted them, and then we went back to thinking, oh, PLC would work better. But really, if you look, PLC was not necessarily in every plan, even though like PLC was really the focus of every building, but we're not sure how impactful PLC was in each of the buildings, even for those that claimed that PLC was their strategies and activities and tasks in the plan. Do we have a shared understanding, and did we put effort into develop that shared understanding prior to MICIP? So we put this quote here, and we put it for our principals when we started creating that mind shift, because we really needed to realize what is it that we're doing versus what should we be doing.
So one of the first pieces of the puzzle when we were first introduced to, I guess, like Fatima is alluding to, this mind shift. And I can remember pre-COVID sitting at a meeting at Lansing at MDE, right? When they were first introducing what MICIP was going to be. And we're like, what is this? What's it look like? And they talked about the whole child, and they talked about, you know, the mind, how the change in thinking, and how we're, like Fatima also alluded to, changing from a system, what it was just, you know, do the plan, put it on the shelf and forget about it and go back to business as usual. And we knew we needed a team at the district level, one that would help guide our, you know, discuss, I guess, hash out what this is going to look like, take it back to our schools. And we had always had a district school improvement committee. That was something that we felt from the get-go from years ago, and we met regularly to decide what's working, what's not, how can we support our schools. While transitioning now to a district MICIP committee, this was going to be the group that was going to spearhead this work. It was one, it needed to be well represented. And so it was reassuring to see that many of I guess, the thinking and the beliefs that we had aligned perfectly with what was expected in the continuous improvement process that the state was introducing to us. And so it was well represented by various stakeholders. We made sure our EL department, our English language department was represented, our special education coordinators. We had representation from elementary as well as secondary. We had classroom teachers there. We had central office staff. Myself from assessment, we made sure we had someone there coming in from business services, because of course the funding part would be important. And all of that was really what it would look like, again, at the building level, because at the end of the day, if it didn't make sense to our administrators and to our teachers, it was never going to translate into something that was doable and something that we could definitely monitor and continue with.
Thank you.
Want to add
That's
something before? I was going to say, I think so
Yeah.
our district MICIP committee, yep.
Yeah, so the
Big
next
rocks.
slide talks about really the big rocks. One of the things is we assessed what do we have in place, how do we leverage what we have in place, what language is common amongst teachers and leaders in buildings, and also how do you get, instead of the word buy-in, we've been using the word commitments. What are teachers committed to? And what misunderstandings do we have? So we wanted to start with, we implemented an activity part of the CNA called Initiative Inventory, and we learned that through the MICIP series. Every building went through the initiative inventory, but before we did that, we did it at the district level. When we did the initiative inventory, we found that PLC was the common process that every building is working at, as well as the district. And the bulk of our budget is spent on PLC, going to professional developments, conferences. MTSS is thrown around in everything we do. There's actually an MTSS meeting, an MTSS day. How do we dissolve these misunderstandings so that we create a mind shift of the MTSS is really everything that goes on about learning in the classroom from the time students enter until the time they leave falls under MTSS. It's not that meeting on Monday morning. Is there a shared understanding amongst teaching staff who are the most important and impactful individuals that stand in front of students? How are these measured? Are we measuring integrity of implementation? We talk about tier 1 strong instruction. Do people understand that this really falls under MTSS and it is the main building block of an effective MTSS process? PLC, the 4 questions. Do people understand that MTSS and PLC are braided? And how do we leverage that as part of the MICIP process to make sure that we have continuous improvement? So I have to be honest with you, and Hilda knows this, that up until today, we are working on dissolving this misunderstanding, because when you want to undo learning, it's much more difficult than establishing learning, because these are wrong perceptions and wrong practices that have been in place for so many years. We've been hearing PLC for the last 18 years, as far as I remember, ever since I started in this district. So we needed to not only create a mind shift, but also dissolve misunderstandings. And this is the process that we're going through. The pre-planning stage really is where MTSS starts. So we made sure all departments are represented so that people are not delivering different messages. The shared understanding has to start within us at the district level through my MICIP committee, and then down to the leadership teams and to the teachers. So we wanted to make sure this is in place. I know that we're very passionate about this because we realize our current reality and we realize our gaps, and we are nowhere near perfect in this. We continue to grow as I think our conversations, we had a principal filling in for a long-term administrator in a building who came back. She's retired, and she sat with us through our administrative meetings in central office last month as we go through these. And she said, one of the comments she made is that the level of conversations among leaders is way different than she had experienced in the past. She talked about the common vocabularies that we're using, the common understanding of the individual practices at the building levels, and the systemic thinking that she noticed. She really made a comment about that. And it is true. That's what we strive to create at the district level. We've dedicated all of the principals' meetings on a monthly basis to be unpacking this process and dissolving misunderstandings as well. I know I spent a lot of time on this
That's
slide, but
okay.
it's really important. This is really
It is.
the
It really
basis
is.
for all the work.
One thing I do want to add to this, prior to coming into this role, I worked with supporting our new teachers in the new teacher program. And while Fatmi was focusing in on the leadership part and with our administrators, we always, at the end of the day, wanted to reassure our teachers, especially many of them new coming in, that it's not that we're introducing something new here. It's aligning what they are doing, reaffirming their work, and trying to bring consistency in our practices. So having that common language, having that common understanding of what you're doing is the right work. We just want to make, work smarter, not harder. So we really want to make sure that when we have a student A going from one building to the next, that they see that the plan continues. So it makes the life of the teacher easier. It makes the student have an easier transition from school to school. And at the end of the day, it provides us at the district level with a monitoring process and protocol that makes sense. So we have expectations that are clear at all of our schools.
Thank you, Hilda. So when we went to the principals to present the roadmap moving forward, if you move to the next slide,
Sure.
We had committed that we are not adding anything new.
No.
We have identified the big rocks in the district that we hear the conversations about all the time. And we made sure that these will be our strategies and activities moving forward. And the big task is really to refine and unpack those to make sure that we create common understandings across the board. So we went back and forth with the principals, and every time we moved at the district committee level, we went back to the principals to collect feedback and adjust the strategies and the activities as we put them in the plan. So we have the big goal, which is college and career readiness and student growth and achievement. And then we decided at the MICIP committee that we need two main strategies and also activities under those strategies. And how do we make sure that we are not treating MTSS as a different entity or process than the PLC process? How do we embed those in the, how does it translate to the building level? And based on the comprehensive needs assessment and initiative inventory, the MICIP committee came to the conclusion that the PLC process would be the best route for our district to take to implement the MTSS process with fidelity and integrity. We like to use the word integrity because it makes a difference when people understand that it's really truly what's happening on the ground. It's not a checkbox. And that's how we define the difference between integrity and fidelity. Fidelity would be more like a checkbox. I did this, this, and this, and I submitted. Integrity is really assessing day in and day out what the practices are, how are they happening, what impact are they leaving, and through observations and other metrics that they're using in buildings. So we try to marry these two terms, honestly, and the best tool we found to use for that was the RTI at Work book through Solution Tree. And really, Solution Tree is what we turn to because people are invested in that. And they know it's a research-based best practice, and they will continue to function through the PLC process. So we figured that's the best way to tackle the MICIP process.
Fatmi mentioned MTSS and that it's not just the meeting. It's not just, the students that we need to provide intervention for. I think if anything, COVID really opened our eyes, not just in Dearborn, but I think across the country, across the world, about how important mentally, physically, emotionally, if a student or a teacher for that example is not ready to learn, it's never going to happen. And it was right before we went into shutdown. I can still remember the last
district school improvement meeting, because it wasn't MICIP yet, we were at, and we were having this conversation. So we kind of had a sense that it was coming, how important it was to be looking at the social emotional needs of students. And we were developing a survey. I still remember being in that room. It was probably maybe a week before, if you recall, Fatmi. And we were there looking at survey data, developing a survey that we were going to send out, looking at how we can really embed social emotional learning in what our day in, day out practices. And then the world changed. And coming back, when we were developing our goal post-COVID, post-pandemic, we wholeheartedly believed that academic was not going to happen if affective was not in place. And we chose not to do two separate goals because we felt the two had to go hand in hand. And so I feel like that graphic right there really embodies our belief at the district level. And when we've introduced this to our building administrators, to all of our teachers, everybody nods their head and goes, yep, this is us. This is the work we want to do. This is what we believe in. And so you'll see now when Fatmi shares how we have our goals set up with the strategies, that the two are at equal billing. And we always make sure one can't happen without the other.
And we wanted to make sure also that we are not implementing both in each one in isolation of the other. We wanted to create also a shared understanding that social emotional learning, and we've been using that term, is learning that takes the well-being of individuals into account. Social emotional learning is not putting academics on the side and implementing some activities in advisory and then going back to your normal business in academics. It's that empathy that teachers demonstrate while communicating with the students. How do we embed it from the time students enter the building until the time they leave the building and beyond? It is not really one activity or one advisory implemented activity that buildings will take and put in their plans. So this is one struggle, I will say. And as much as you create common or shared understandings about this, you still need more. It's not easy coming. And we continue to model through our meetings how we can implement a quick activity in the beginning to demonstrate that people need to know each other. People need to create relationships. The question that you ask students when they first enter your classroom, this is SEL. And the minute you isolate it into its own curriculum, it's not really infused into the daily practice.
So to build that shared understanding, like Fatmi was alluding to, we knew that we would need to have a framework that we could rely on, something that was research-based, something that could easily be translated and adapted and made accessible to our staff and to our students. And so we went with the CASEL competencies that many of you would would be accessing. And we introduced them to all of our administrators. We introduced them to all of our staff. We developed, what does it look like? How did you understand this? Can you define it? What can it look like in school? How do we, like I said, marry it with the academic expectation? And we've been through this now several times, several go-arounds from the start of the year to now. And we really are trying to constantly revisit what it can, like I said, dissolve those misconceptions. But again, how do you understand this so that we can move it forward? Did you want me to share on that link there for the?
Yeah, can you click on that link? This is an activity that leadership teams from buildings in the monthly meeting went over to develop that shared understanding, to brainstorm where they are in terms of MTSS academic and MTSS affective. And again, we chose to use these two strategies under MICIP. And we limited the strategies to two. We wanted to make sure every activity that we implement in buildings fell under one of them. Another concept that we kept in mind as we were developing the MICIP goals, strategies, and activities is, as much as we can, is to streamline. We don't want to go to buildings and say, you need to implement EDP. It is a MDE requirement. So we made sure that we took all of these requirements and we fit them under one of the two strategies. So if we go back to the next slide, you will see that the two strategies are MTSS academic and MTSS affective. We went back to the principals group and their leadership teams from the buildings, examined what the proposed strategies were by the MTSS, by the MICIP committee, and then went back and forth to refine these. If as you can see, the academic is really the tiers of instruction, and the affective would be the core competencies. But again, we are not identifying essentials for the competencies, but they do represent our tier one. And we say if you are functioning with the 5 competencies in mind, that means you have a strong tier one social emotional learning environment in your classroom. Identifying students for tier 2 under affective would be what group of students need support from different support staff or from you or with their families, depending on what you notice in terms of the competencies. And then the EDP, which is the Educational Development Plan, which is a requirement of MDE, we have selected to put that under MTSS affective because really that measures the students' career path in the future and their social emotional well-being as well, because they do develop personal, academic, and career goals under the EDP.
As a reminder to everyone, really, so when we start off a building meeting, a district level meeting, we will always revisit this. This is usually an opening slide to let us know, okay, where are we in the process? What particular activity are we focusing on? Where does it align? So nothing we do, nothing we say is out of this context. We want to make sure that everything supports this big umbrella of student achievement, right? We want to improve their academic achievement growth, and we know the vehicle to get there, as Fatmi said, is through the PLC process. We have those 2 strategies that we focus on, and everything, all decisions made at the district level, and what we encourage our building leaders to do, support this. If it doesn't fit anywhere underneath here, we're going to ask the question of why are we doing it then?
We asked, actually what we told the buildings after they've unpacked this work is we said, this is really your school improvement plan. These are your strategies and these are your activities. If you feel that your building needs an additional activity based on a specific need, feel free to add it. But these are really the systemic strategies and activities in the district that you're tagged in or on. So we asked the question, do your teachers and staff in the buildings know what your school improvement goal and strategies are? And we always encouraged verbally safety in terms of communications and reflections. And we encouraged them to safely express whether their building staff know their school improvement plans. And the answer was no, because we used to have the assist plans. We used to have our own developed plans with strategies. And now we are shifting into the MICIP process that does not require individual building plans. But if you have heard me occasionally in the MICIP series meetings and with MDE, I was always posing the question of how are we going to sustain the continuous improvement in the buildings if building plans are not required and there's no accountability? How do we tie accountability to this so that we make sure that what's being said and done at the district level is truly implemented with integrity at the building levels? Because people laugh at me sometimes when I say we don't have students in central office, we have students in the buildings. So good practices need to be implemented in the buildings. So we asked the buildings, we created the template for each individual building of the 33 and the 39 programs, they all have plans. And they really presented this to their staff saying that these are our strategies and activities for the building. So every building has those as part of their school improvement plan.
Yeah, we'll show you those in a slide or two. But yes, definitely that it's all about, what can we provide you with? What support can we give at the district level to make sure it can actually happen and it's doable, it's realistic. And so going back to what I said earlier about having a shared understanding, having all of this new staff of, the 1,500 teachers that we have, a third of them, at least 500 of them have less than 5 years of teaching experience. And we know that the top group is on the way out. I mean, in terms of retirement, in terms of leaving the profession. So we're trying to, that revolving door, we want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And so Fatmi mentioned previously that we looked at solution tree as one of the options. And we felt that that would be the best fit for how we're going to get there. Because we knew that if we did not provide strategically implemented professional development that really aligned to what we are, our intended outcomes, it was never going to happen, because PLC was that buzzword that's been around forever. But what does it actually look like? What does it actually sound like? Is it really being put into practice with integrity as we really try to believe and we'll hope to achieve? And then we know we have amazing teachers. We value the work that they do. They're invested in this. They've chosen this profession, but how can we provide them with the support to get the job done? And so, Fatmi, I was going to say, we can get into the plan and what the PD is going to look like.
Right, great segue, Hilda. I wanted to also give the background that our district functions in 3 separate feeders.
Oh, yes, thank you.
We have around 20,000 students, and we have 3 major high schools in addition to the other secondary options and high school programs. And we have 3 executive directors, and I'm one of 3 of student achievement. Each one leads one feeder track in addition to our other district responsibilities. So I lead the Dearborn High feeder track, which is the Dearborn High School and the middle schools and elementary that feed into Dearborn High. A second executive director leads the Fordson feeder track, and the third leads Etzel Ford. And this is when we have the monthly meetings with the principals, we wanted to make sure that the 3 of us are aligned and the 3 of us have a shared understanding about these big rocks, as we called them earlier. So we decided that for this year and last year, we combined our feeder meetings with the principals so that we are delivering the same message. And prior to that, we have a new person on board this year. Dr. Jill Shopel left, she retired. We started this conversation prior to her retirement. And we figured that if we don't fit PLC and MTSS under school improvement, then we're going to continue to function in separate pockets, and we're going to continue to have different practices. And we've heard often from principals that why can't the district be on the same page? We had very successful schools with high percentage of students on free lunch and students with EL. And these schools showed and demonstrated high proficiency rates and consistent practices, whereas others did not. And this is a huge indicator that we don't have systems in place. So we made sure that we leveraged the MICIP process into creating systems. And the question that I always heard from my feeder principals, if the district wants us to do this, then what is the district doing for us? They felt safe enough telling me this. And this is where the conversation started, that what can we do at the district level to set the scene for these buildings to make sure that they are able to do this work. And we will go over briefly how we're gonna, for next year, create early dismissal for them to be able also to,
fingers crossed,
to improve their PLC process in the buildings. So what we did is we invested Title II this year into hiring solution tree. And the question that we always had is, we continue to provide professional development and send district level and administrative teams into workshops and conferences, but when they come back, how much transfer is there in terms of what they learn to the classroom? So we decided that it's going to be classroom teachers that we're going to pull to be with the solution tree experts. And we're going to have them sit in these rooms and do the work and take it back to their classroom so that there's not a person in the middle transitioning this information. So we did not depend on reps from buildings. We pulled every teacher and provided subs, and we hired consultants. And yes, it is very costly, but this is, we view this as very high value professional development that is really impacting the teacher and what they're doing on a daily basis. So we took all the content areas, the 4 content areas in middle school and high school, and the ELA and math in elementary, and we pulled those teachers to, and we value what they do, and we made sure they know that we're not gonna put anything away. It's the essentials that they've been identifying for the last few years or several years. And what we called it is calibrating essentials. We met with Solution Tree, and we explained that every building has essentials, but if you put them side to side, there's a huge difference, and there's no alignment between buildings within one district. So they created those 3-day conference workshops for the teachers, and these were work days where they calibrated the essentials, and we broke the task into 4 phases, if you can see here. And each phase we go through different activities in order to meet the expectations.
So not only are we gonna, our goal is at the end of this process, which we recognize is going to take all of, we started in January, I believe was the first, in January, and it will go through the beginning part of next year. We will leave with essentials that are identified at every grade level for every content area, with pacing guides. So, I mean, imagine being a new teacher coming in, or even a veteran teacher coming in, being on the same page as your colleagues that you can collaborate with across the district, having common assessments that are developed, and then ultimately moving into a standards-based grading system, which is something that we've, again, dabbled in pockets at the high school level, a little bit at the middle school, but this would be a K-12 common report card that really has identified that success criteria that we know is essential and, the most impactful for students and their learning.
So the column on the left is this year's work, and it takes 3 full days with Solution Tree. And the column on the right is next year's work. But if you go back to the MICIP slide with the 2 strategies, these are really the tasks under the activities. So anything that they're truly doing and we're spending our budgets on is truly under MICIP. And that's how we make sure that we're grading the budgets. And when buildings try to purchase programs, implement different initiatives, the alignment question is always there. So teachers need tools. We know that we have tools at the district level, but teachers needed more precise tools to be able to monitor this work as they implement it. For the Solution Tree work, we have a high number of teaching staff who take leadership roles in the district. And these include the Title I resource teachers, the English language development specialists, the instructional coaches, and the coordinators at the high school level. So to plan this work, and these are typically part of the MICIP committee, to plan this work, we made sure that there is this guiding coalition group at the district level that whose job is to create a, I'm gonna go back to the slide, to create a building. These served as the building level ambassadors to maintain the support and communications. This team is also comprised of the support staff and sometimes classroom teachers. For example, if you're talking social studies and science, we do not have support staff scaffolding these areas. So these we pulled teacher teams for that. So they were intentionally identified to represent buildings across the district as we work to bring the PLC process to scale in all Dearborn schools. What we did is we called them the sustainers, and we communicated the goal for them. And the purpose is to sustain the PLC work that we are going through this work for the future in terms of the new staff and onboarding new staff, as well as maintaining that pacing guide and learning targets.
So pacing, we know we had to develop a sense of urgency, but at the same time, we had to be mindful to allow for time to be, to, collect that feedback, to have some processing time, to make all staff comfortable with being able to share, this is working, this is not working, because if we come up against some resistance, then we don't want, we're invested too much in this. We believe so wholeheartedly in this. We do not want to let this go away. And I feel there's a sense of excitement every time I've attended one of the sessions and watching our teams work, because they know what they're doing now is not only something that we're going to, do it and be done with it. This is something that's going to impact their instructional practices long-term. It will make them better teachers, better educators, and ultimately it will, benefit our students.
So again, there are excitements and struggles as people are going through this work, because this work really requires progress monitoring. And if you're not doing the work right, it's going to illuminate right away in the progress monitoring tool. So what does it look like at the teacher level? And we always ask that question. It could look great in the plan, but what are the teachers doing? So what we did is we used something that came to our district through PLC. If you have heard of Dr. Tisha Thomas and the Amplify Your Impact book, which is coaching collaborative teams, she had a tool called SIG protocol, which is strategy implementation guide. And it's really meant to be for buildings and for teacher teams. As individual teacher teams meet, they can monitor and assess where they are, and it helps them move to the next steps in the process. One of the advantages of using the SIG is that you can make it your own. You can tweak it and make it your own. You do not have to take it from the Amplify book and implement it as is. But Tisha did encourage, as we worked with Tisha for the last couple of years, she encouraged us to make the SIG our own. So we took advantage of that and we made it the teacher tool in the buildings. And we created another tool that we used for the building leadership team so that we can go to the MICIP platform and assess the level of implementation of these activities and know where our district is. One of the principals took it upon herself and she put the SIG concepts on a forum to assess where her staff are or her staff is in the fall, and then assess back in the spring and see if they've advanced in terms of implementation the concepts. So I think it would be worthwhile showing you the SIG tool at this time.
Yeah, I think we have it on another slide. Yes, I will bring it up.
And maybe if we can stop for a minute to see if you have any questions or clarifications, because we've been talking for a while.
I know we're doing a lot of talking. We apologize. So I'm going to actually go to our collaboration document here. And
one thing we try to do is reduce the number of templates and forms.
Sorry about that. Let me have it actually pop open. There we go.
Click on the title on top. Yeah. So this is the tool that teachers, when they sit like social studies teachers or third grade teachers, each team uses one on their own. And they truly assess. And we broke the strategies that you've seen on the previous slide. We broke them into gold standards. So the PLC process is really broken into gold standards here so that people can dig deeper to understand what characteristics should I have in place for a highly functioning PLC process for my team specifically. So each team will have different levels on this. The building will not have one level, but each team will supply their levels.
Right, because we recognize that we have varied levels of expertise in terms of how well PLC teams work together. And so this is non-judgment. This is not something that, is turned into us at the district level. This is really for them to assess and to evaluate where they're at, to identify areas that they feel that, hey, we need support in this. They share this information with their building principals. And, this is really where it becomes the reality. It's opening your eyes. We know what our exemplars are, those gold standards where we achieve and strive to be. How are we going to get there?
Yeah, and we felt that when buildings and teachers have many priorities, often they do not lead to impact student achievement. So if they know this is what I'm focusing on, they understand what their role in the process is. So they continue to go through that. And what we've heard from building leaders is that for teachers to go through this, even though they're not at the developing or exemplary level, for example, in terms of unwrapping standards, at least they are aware of what should be there for a highly functioning unwrapping of standards, a highly functioning pacing guide, for example. What should I be doing to be exemplary? If you know what you don't have to be exemplary, what are the chances of focusing your work on that as a PLC team? And one of the questions that the solution tree representatives asked in each of the sessions, and we made sure to communicate that to all of them, is that describe what happens in the PLC meetings in your buildings. And the teachers were honest about that. What are they talking about? What does it sound like? And what does it look like? So this is the gold standard number one, which is really, and now we memorize the gold standards as we speak about them because we're using common language, is building collaborative teams. We spent the last, I would say the last 3 meetings with building administrators trying to unpack gold standard number one and identify where the gaps are in the building. There are so many roadblocks that are preventing people to move to gold standard number 2. The teachers are already on gold standard number 2 with solution 3, which is identifying essentials and creating pacing guides and unpacking into learning targets. But really, if you don't have collaborative teams working together, following norms and setting goals for themselves, and these are the concepts. If you see, we put the concepts, we broke them down by concept. This is Tisha's SIG, but it didn't look like that. We made it our district SIG. So people know in details and fine grains of what does it look like to have a highly functioning PLC at each step of the way. If I was talking 3 years ago, we wouldn't know what comes first, what comes next in PLC. And within these steps, what finite steps do I need to implement to make sure that I'm getting there? So this is the level of, and to me, this is program evaluation. Because when strategies and activities fail, it's not because they're not research-based. We often choose research-based everywhere. I doubt that any principal or any leader would go and select a strategy that's not research-based. But often the failure is because of integrity of implementation. And if you don't have a precise roadmap for people to follow, then the strategy is going to show you that it's not impactful. And why is that? This is the important question. And how do you answer that? Did I implement it with integrity? And if I did not, where were the gaps? And how did I measure that? So we felt that if the teachers don't measure that, we don't have a way. Like student assessment data, of course, achievement data, it is telling, but you can't put your finger on really what was the impact there. So that's another metric or another tool to let us know that if this building is not making it, why are they not making it?
And at the district level, as Fatmi alluded, our last 3 meetings with them at central office with all our administrators has really been unpacking this and identifying, okay, if there are roadblocks, what are they? What can we do together to collaboratively come to a solution? Perfect example, which everyone got hung up of, I still remember when we shared this, was that 120 minutes that are built into the school day for teams to be able to meet. Because they were putting their hands up and they're like, We can't do this. It
don't
doesn't
have
build into
that.
the skill book.
And people ask, can we change that 120? And we said, no, let's not
No.
water down the expectation because we can't do it.
What
Let's
can we do to get you there?
strive to get to this expectation. And this is what we're advocating with our board now, and with it's the new negotiation year now. And we need 120 minutes for teachers to be able to do the work that we want them to do. And that is the most impactful. By the way, Tisha Thomas is hired with Solution Tree now. She used to work with our district prior
Independently, yeah.
to contracting with Solution Tree. And what we have learned after we contracted with Solution Tree to do this work, we can no longer get Tisha on the side, which was a better investment for us when we used to get her in the past. But if you do try to contact Tisha, she is a great resource for this. She understands what this work is. She's been working with our district for the last 2-3 years, and she really likes the SIG and how we tweaked it. She shared another district with us, and this is how it was inspired by that when we created it for our district.
All right. Did you want me to quickly, we've got about 15 minutes left, Fatmi. Do you want me to share the Howard example?
Yes, please. And then we'll rush through the rest of the slides. So if you go down, Hilda, this is one building example of how they assessed each concept on the SIG tool and where the teachers are. And the plan is to do it again in the spring and see if they have moved. And we don't expect huge movement within 1 year. We're being realistic about that. If you can go back to the slides, Hilda.
All right. So I was gonna say, I know Fatmi mentioned data. So I'll jump in here with something that we have. We took our work in MICIP. So the actual platform, if you're familiar with it, which many of us on this conference call today here are, is we know that initial beginning step is developing your data story. And so that translated perfectly to the work that we have always done and believed in here in Dearborn, which was really working with our building administrators and understanding that comprehensive needs assessment process. And so we last year really felt that for our administrators and their leadership teams at the building to understand what the reality is of their building was to be looking at the data. And it's not just achievement data or academic data, which we're always so commonly, relying on our SAT or, our MSTEP scores. It's also looking at the 4 different types of data and how they impact instruction and learning and how buildings operate to their biggest potential. So we went through and reviewed what academic data was, of course, perception, demographic, and process. And we really mirrored what would those same questions that you would see on the MICIP platform with our building administrators. And so they didn't have to necessarily go into the website to be able to do this. We really did this with them. And our Fatmi also, talked about that initiative inventory, because once they looked at their data and had a better picture of, okay, what it is that they were successful in, but at the same time where there were areas that they needed to grow on, they took a step back and said, okay, what do we have in place? What initiatives are we currently doing that align with the needs that we have? Are there duplicates? Are there things that are still missing? Are there things that we need to be, tightening? And they left that 4-part workshop with us with identifying what a challenge statement was for their building and what they needed to do going forward into this coming school year, which they previously had done, that they wanted to focus on.
I remember for that protocol, we used 3 different protocols to make sure that the questions made the most sense for the staff. And it was not only building principles. Another realization that we came to see at the district level is that it is not enough to deliver the information to the principals. You need a leadership team from the buildings who will take this information and lead with it. I suggest, if you have not done initiative inventory, to do this. It's a very important step under process data, so that people could understand what overlaps, what strategies and activities are not needed, and what are the most impactful ones are. This was very helpful to us. Did every building in our district do it? Probably. There are a few probably who did not finish it. But again, I talked about commitment and buy-in, and people come to this shared understanding at different steps and different levels. And this is what we strive to achieve for our buildings. We mentioned the SIG earlier. If you go to the next slide, Hilda. We didn't want to overwhelm teachers with this date tool. This is the Dearborn Activity Implementation Tool, and this is how we measure where the buildings are. Buildings measure where their teachers are using the SIG, but the same language on the SIG is on this tool as well. But we ask principals, the accountability to us at the district level is from the principal, not from the teachers. So the teachers submit their levels to the principals on the SIG, and principals will examine the levels and submit it on the date tool. We did call it Dearborn Activity Implementation Tool. If you look at the gold standards and the concepts, they are exactly the same as you have seen on the SIG tool for the teachers. We wanted them to mirror each other because we wanted, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, it is most importantly what's done at the classroom and within the teacher teams. And this is inclusive of both academic and effective student needs. Administrative and teacher evaluation is also based on the gold standards as we evaluate educators in the district. Unpacking of the gold standards is happening both at the district and at the building level as well.
And then one thing, Fatmi, I don't know, we mentioned this, I guess, throughout our conversation today, but professional development is a big part of this, because we're making sure if there are gaps in this that we recognize at the building level or at the PLC level, what professional development do we need to provide, whether it's through our work with Solution Tree, but we want to make sure that nothing is done in isolation. And it's always coming, where does it fit on the date tool? Does it, address one of our needs?
If you look at the third column, it has levels in there, and these are the levels in MICIP. So we can go simply to MICIP, and you will see that we rarely go into the MICIP platform. And I think that as Terry and Ben and all the communications we've been hearing from MDE is that you're spending most of the time on the monitor and adjust. You assess needs, you did your plan, you create interim targets for yourself. You can go to those and revisit and update, but really the bulk of the work should be spent in the building and through the district work that you're doing day in and day out. You can go to the platform and make these updates as needed. I think we are due to go in there, and we may be getting a call from Terry, hey, you need to go and put the levels for your activities and strategies. And if you see, the formula has flipped. Now we have it on the ground. We need to go update it on the platform. It's not that we submitted something on the platform and we're not doing on the ground. So we made sure we have 3 levels there that align with the MICIP levels for the monitor and adjust. And we told principals to please not hand this date tool to the teachers. We don't want to overwhelm them. Keep it within your leadership team and know your level. And how do you know your level? It's from your SIG protocol that the teachers are using.
Okay. And then, like Fatmi also mentioned previously, everything ties in. We use the Danielson framework for our evaluation process for our teachers, and they have, their professional growth goal. And so many of our PLC teams have recognized that this needs to be my goal. How will I, what area of the SIG do I need to be focused on with my grade mates or with my colleagues? So once you have that alignment, we're all moving in the right direction. And so many of them use this both at the administrative and the teacher level to identify what their growth is going to be for that year.
If you can go back one slide, Hilda, I wanted to point out that the PD in the buildings should also be aligned to this work. So we created a building professional development planner where buildings plot their plan for the year. If you click on that, Hilda.
Sure.
And that should be reflective of the gold standards. and we were intentional asking the buildings to plan in terms of gold standards. We are giving you autonomy on how you plan this, what you're going to use, and the SEL competencies. So you can see that reflected on the PD planner for the buildings as well.
So it's plugged in, it's always aligned to one of the goals, strategies, or activities. If they are, using specific funding sources, we try to allocate them again, because that blending and braiding of funds, and then tying it into who your presenters are. So this way, the building the leadership teams at the buildings have that clear path of where they're going. It's not just like, oh, we got a PD day coming up. What are we going to do? No. They look forward to those PD days because they know that their needs are being plugged in. And this is something that they decide to make sure all the work is aligned.
One other tool that we felt we needed is minimum expectations and a time frame for buildings so that they know what should I have in place by the end of this year? What should I have in place by the end of next year? And so we're going through that now amongst the 3 executive directors, and we're going to be communicating that to buildings that you have until the end of the year to ensure that all of your essentials are unpacked into learning targets. These are the language I'm speaking right now. If you go to the SIG, you're going to find it under the concepts. We are giving them time to establish these concepts and in terms of implementation, but these are going to be minimum expectations. We're not going to wait until year 4 to have embedded intervention / acceleration to recover learning gaps. But what we're saying is we're giving you until the end of the 3rd year to establish all of these. But are some principals capable of doing it within 1 year? Absolutely. Are we encouraging that? Yes. But we are making sure that we're being realistic in terms of expectations and timelines.
All right. There was a quick question in the chat, Fatmi, and maybe we can clarify. So someone was asking how long or how often our PD and PLC days are. So professional development for this year, really it's tied in with the teacher's contract that we have currently in place. Like many of you, we have the full day professional developments that are prior to the start of the school year. There's 1 or 2 depending on election day, what have you. And there's a few that are half day professional development. But at the same time, staff meetings in our buildings are not the traditional staff meeting that we think where it's for announcements. It's really been reimagined. And that's something that I think our administrators wholeheartedly believe in, that's been in place now, that staff meetings are truly professional development / professional learning community time. So that's something that we have in place.
Right, what Hilda said, and we use the building, the administrative meetings at the district level to put buildings in groups, smaller elementary, larger elementary, middle and high school, so that they can share. That gold standard number 1 speaks to that question. It speaks to, are we allowing time for PLC in the buildings? And if yes, when? And if not, if no, why? So some buildings do leverage the staff meetings and late starts for PLC meetings for teacher teams. And they do that very well. And that's why we put them together so they can share how they do it. Others are not seeing success with that. So we have to be realistic of about where we are. But in buildings where this is happening, you can see that it really impacts student achievement and it's highly visible. When we do those walkthroughs with the MICIP walkthrough tool, you can tell this building has systems in place, and student achievement shows it. And it's evident that they do use their staff meetings and PLC to leverage, late start to leverage PLC work and creating and establishing systems. So these are things that they struggle, and some have a hard time giving up initiatives that are not really aligned. And we're being patient, and we're scaffolding carefully, and making sure that buildings understand that it's their commitment that's going to make the plan work, coupled with some accountability from the district level.
So we've got about 3 minutes left, Fatmi. So I went to our very last slide here just so we can make sure we can try to get that in before we wrap up, unless, I mean, please, I know there was a lot of information that we shared, and so we're welcome to questions. I've been trying to catch the ones in the chat, but I'm excited about the work that we're doing. I really feel this, like I said, my 28th year in the district, and I feel that we're trying to get on, you know, given our size, that's really been one of the biggest obstacles. And like we said before, like having buildings operating on different places and silos, and we really are now listening and trying to get all on the same page.
Absolutely. And you have the slides and you can reference any documents that you want to. But
Please,
really,
yes.
this is tried and true. This is exactly the same work I did with my team as a building leader when I was a principal. And I took a school that was on the brink of being taken over by the state. It was in the 12th percentile. And we've established these systems with 24, but the third year. Within 3 years, we went to the 72 percentile rank on the state top to bottom list, just by establishing these systems and making sure that teacher teams are intact and they're doing the right work. So it is really tried and true at the building level. And now at the district level, we're hoping that with the right timing and pacing, we can bring the district to having these systems.
So I'm going to thank everybody for coming to our session today. Please, please, please do not hesitate. If you have questions, reach out. Everybody's got my contact info. It's on the dashboard. Fatmi has been a tremendous resource and is always willing to, you know, answer questions of what it looks like in your building or your district or your school. So, you know, don't hesitate to reach out. But I
think we have the contact information on the first slide.
We
right?
do. We have it on the slide, and as well as I have it on the dashboard as well. We have now a 15-minute break, and I'm more excited to have the leadership team from Fruitport coming on at 10:15. So you can leave the room, go back to the main room. If you want to hear more from David, if you want to hear Fruitport, just kind of put your camera off and be back at 10:15. But thank you, everybody, for wanting to learn about our group. And
thank you so much. Yes, and we're always here to answer any questions.
Awesome. I'm going to pause the
I think
report.
somebody raised their hand.
Lori. Yeah. No, just a clap.
We're clapping. All right, welcome back, everybody. We have the Fruitport Community Schools here for their presentation, which I'm very excited to see. So sit back, relax. I'll try to monitor the chat, but they're the ones really leading the way. So if you need anything, and then we'll go through to the end of our session today at about 11:20 or so, and then take up some last minute housekeeping items, and we'll be able to sign off from here. So we're not going back to the main session at all. So Allison, they're all yours.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. So my name is Allison Camp. I'm the curriculum director for Fruitport Schools. So the first slide is really just kind of telling you a little bit about who we are and where we're located. We're just a titch smaller than Dearborn is. So our process will be a little bit different than what that team just awesomely presented. And what will be also a little bit different is I'm going to talk a little bit about the district process in this work. And then I have two administrators who are going to take over and talk to you specifically about their work. Emily Bassey is the assistant principal at Edgewood Elementary, and Monty Kelly is the principal at Fruitport Middle School. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like how this work has evolved at the district level, and then let the two of them kind of talk about how their journey has also evolved. So a little bit about us. So we are located on the west side of the state, the southern part of Muskegon County. So maybe cities that you might have heard of: Grand Haven, Spring Lake, Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids is about a half an hour away, but we're just north of Grand Haven and Spring Lake. We have about 2,700 students district-wide. We have 3 K-5 elementaries, so I put that on there just to kind of highlight that they do have overlapping grade levels. We have 1 middle school and 1 high school. About 55% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. We do house some regional special ed programs in our district, so our percentages is maybe higher than some districts. So we have about 15% of our students that qualify for special ed services, and about 85% of our students would identify as white. That's a little bit about who we are. How we operated before in our school improvement process is kind of tongue in cheek. I'd like to say we operated using hope as our major strategy for school improvement, meaning it wasn't strategic, it wasn't explicit. There was a lot of hard work going on, and I'm not I mean, I was the leader of the work, right? So there's no one to blame but myself for the fact that hope was our strategy. But definitely this work has really highlighted for me how important making sure your work is in alignment, which we just heard a lot from our friends in Dearborn. Previously, we here are some of the systems that we had. So we have what other districts might call a district improvement team. We call it instructional council. That group met regularly, but the primary focus of that group was to approve new programs or textbooks for the district. There were teacher reps from every building. There was an admin rep from every building, and then there was the technology parent. So there was someone from our technology group, a parent, and someone from our special ed were also on the committee. But I will say, and I'll talk a little bit more when we get to how we operate now, those people were truly kind of representatives. There wasn't an intentionality around who was on the committee. It was kind of whoever was either volunteered on their own or was voluntold to be on the committee. The school improvement teams kind of met irregularly in our buildings. There wasn't kind of an expectation that they meet regularly and discuss data. The goals that we had were, do everything. There wasn't really an intentionality or a focus around our work. And we did the consolidated app in the total backwards way, meaning like we started with what we wanted to fund, and then we worked backward from there. So that was definitely how we operated before. So where we are now, and again, I was kind of joking if people were on before, but Dave Hunt has provided a ton of help to our work. And so I just want to make sure that I honor that a lot of the improvements that we have made, it's because of Dave's work kind of standing alongside us in this process. But now, so how our district improvement team has changed. So it's still called instructional council. We do still meet monthly, but what we've done is 3 of the months of the school year, instead of meeting after school, we meet for 3 hours during the school day. Now, when we have representatives on the district improvement team, they are intentionally made up of people who are also sitting on the school improvement teams. So it's not just a random set of people, it's people who are kind of informing both groups. They're bringing information back to their buildings to kind of talk about what they were hearing at the district level, and also bringing information from their school improvement team meetings to the district. So there's that good feedback loop there. And we did have to make a commitment to provide stipends for people who are on these committees. The school improvement teams, there is an expectation that they at least meet monthly, around and making sure that they're looking at that behavior and academic data. Some of our teams have even gotten to the point where they come in and they have a day-long meeting in August to do planning and getting ready for the school year. The goal, which I'll get into in a second, the goals, instead of that whole do everything approach, is really this idea of, we needed to get back to where we were after COVID. And so the goal that I've created for the district is to fully implement the instructional resources and initiatives that the district had invested in to improve student achievement and engagement. And so for us, it was really like when we started this work 2 years ago, it was, we're coming out of COVID. That really changed a lot of things in our schools, just in order to quote unquote get by, especially during that 2021 school year. And so what that meant, right, is, people have limited capacities of time and resources. So when we were actually making them do all these switches to survive that 2021 school year, then a lot of the best practice things that we were working toward prior to that had kind of got left by the wayside. And so really this goal was about how do we get back to doing school the way we know we need to. And so what I did is I provided a list of here are the things that we were working on prior to COVID. And as each building, each of the 5 buildings got to choose which of these things do you think is most important to get your building back to where it needs to be, and then continue to move us forward. So you can kind of see on this slide. So the first 3 buildings that are listed there, obviously are elementaries, and then the last one is our high school. So the high school, just a little bit about that. We were out of compliance with some of the amount of time our special ed students were spending in special ed environments. So we took a look at what some school districts around us were doing, and we switched our model, so that when you see that term workshop, I know that means lots of different things, but it has to do with how we provide special ed services to our high school students. So that was what they chose as their focus. So now what we're doing is we are focusing on that spot in the middle, right? That step 2, where it talks about a miracle occurs. And what we've tried to do is figure out how we can be more strategic and explicit around that step 2, right? So what do we need to do in order to fully implement these, whether it was an instructional resource or an initiative like PBIS, like what does it mean to fully implement those? And so that's what we spent a bulk of our time on. I'm going to show some documents near the end of my part of the presentation, but each of the teams went through and fleshed out, like, what does it mean to say that you're teaching from Super Kids, which is our K2 ELA program, or what does it mean for kids to be fully engaged into iReady, and how does that work in an MTSS process at our middle school? So that we spent that time really fleshing that out. In the Dearborn example, they talked about that gold standard. So I don't know that we use that language, but it was like, what does that mean to say that we are doing it? And then, so we talked about the practices, the process, the materials, professional development, like what are the things that we need? So we've defined what it is. Now, what do we need in order to do it? And then how do we monitor that it's actually being done? So for a long time, we've known what we should be doing, but have we ever really monitored whether we were actually doing it? The example that I always give, right? So I have to take this medicine in the morning and it tells me that I have to take it on an empty stomach. Well, if I don't actually take it on an empty stomach, and then I later tell my doctor that my medicine isn't working, well, is the medicine not working, or am I not doing it the way that it was, directed to be done? So that's kind of like the example that I use with our teams is like, okay, you can come to me and say that something isn't working, but I'm going to come back to you and say, were you doing it the way that it was supposed to be done? So each of the buildings, then once they had kind of decided what their strategy was going to be, then they worked on what types of data will we use to monitor our work. So for example, our high school used a lot of perception data in the terms of staff surveys. Edgewood's going to talk a little bit about how they utilize the TFI. Our buildings chose all of these different types of data to help them when in their monitoring process. For Shetler, their work with the ELA implementation, they used a lot of peer observation protocols. So they were in each other's room monitoring, the kind of work that was being done during the ELA block. I don't know that we did a ton of principal monitoring. I don't think that that's where a lot of our work landed, but we also artifacts. So for our iReady implementation, taking a look at the number of minutes that our kids were on their learning pathway. Like, again, were they putting in the amount of time that they were going to need to put in order to see the results? So while they were also fleshing out what it was also trying to determine what's the best data to monitor whether we are actually doing it or not. And then at the end, because we're in year 2, let's take a look at what that data says. So we, if we said we were doing it, what does that outcome data say? Did this work? One piece of data that I just kind of want to add to this, and Edgewood in particular is going to talk about it, but we also use the school climate survey I would consider that more of an impact kind of data that we use in our district. So I take no credit for this awesome diagram that Dave created, but it does I'm kind of a linear sequential kind of person. And this is like a really good flow chart for me that I like to follow, but it does help, just this idea of, help us kind of organize our thinking. We can't hop to the end and say, did it work or not, without really trying to do that self-reflection about, well, did we do what we say we were going to do? And so this this flow chart just kind of helps us know, like in our 3 meetings throughout the year, when we're looking at information, what is it telling us? Is it telling us that it's not working, or is it telling us that we didn't do what we said we would do? So really just kind of focusing on, making sure we do what we said we were going to do. A piece that I think really stands out to me in this process that's different than what we had done in the past is this idea of building in those smaller improvement cycles, or those smaller cycles of data collection that help really kind of identify, issues with implementation along the way. It also helps in a lot of cases, it gives us information to tell us we're doing something wrong and we need to adjust, but it also gives us great celebration points. Hey, we're doing it right, it's working, and let's make sure that we celebrate that. So it helps that buy-in to this work. And so I think this was just helpful because a lot of times it felt like we were waiting for the big data to come at the end of the year, and you never really knew along the way whether what you were doing was having any kind of impact at all. So in our work with Dave, he just really talked about how important this monitoring is along the way, so that you're just not, waiting and again, hoping that the things that you are doing are going to make a difference. So what we do when we come together as a district team is we are reporting out to each of the groups in the room about how things are going. So I will admit, when we first started, I thought when we were going to have these bigger chunks of time with our teams, that they would be spending the time during those meetings diving into the data. But now I've come to understand a bigger impact for our work is that actually they've done that prior to coming. They do that at the school level. They've did the data dive into their monitoring data, and then they come to the instructional council meeting and they present how things are going. And it's developed this idea of open accountability, which has been pretty powerful for our group. So like I said, the goal for the district, right, is this idea of, here was a list of things that we were all doing prior to COVID. And the buildings got to choose the one that they thought was most important for them to kind of get back to school as normal, but then also like move us forward. And so, so even though they have chosen a focus area, they're still responsible for, so for the middle school example, they've chosen iReady, but they're still responsible for making sure that their PBIS systems are working. So when Edgewood, for example, is reporting out about how things are going with their PBIS process, then the middle school team could be taking notes to take back to their team to make, make tweaks to their PBIS systems back in their district. So that has been a real shout out to the teams in our instructional council at the last meeting. There was great crosstalk with one another. Even though they were there to kind of present their piece, they were also learning from one another to take back and improve their systems back in their building. We also take the approach of, we've got to work through roadblocks together. So, okay, we picked this thing, we tried this, it isn't working. What's the collective, group think around how we could bridge this barrier in the room? So that has also been great. So not just a place to celebrate your successes, but also a safe space to say, hey, we tried this, it isn't working, so we're trying this other thing. And what ideas do the rest of you have to make this work? And the last piece too is no one wants to be the group in the room that has done nothing, right? Has not followed through with their data, has not followed through with having their meetings. And so that's just been a really big outcome. I think that I was kind of unintended. This is something I didn't know was going to happen. It's just this idea that we're all in this together, learning and growing and pushing each other along in the process. So I'm going to stop talking soon and I'm going to turn it over to our buildings to share a little bit more boots on the ground about the work that they're doing. But I just kind of wanted to highlight that, this work, although there's been similarities, there's also been differences. So just trying to honor the different approaches that our buildings and our building administrators have taken with the work. There's multiple, ways to get to the same endpoint. And so it's kind of that thing for me, like, what do I got to be loose with and what do I got to be tight with? And so I'm tight with the expectation that the work is done, but loose with the pathway that you go to get there. And so a couple of just different resources that I would share. So Edgewood's going to talk in a little bit more detail in a minute, but this is an example of how, and a similar resource was shown by Dearborn, but this was the strategy implementation guide that that the Edgewood team used to really kind of define the different components of PBIS and how they were going to monitor and implement that work. So this is kind of one example of what this would look like. The Shetler, their goal was around ELA implementation. So I talked a little bit about, so they have a different document as well, where they fleshed out all of the components of what they expected to see. So our two programs that we use Super Kids as our K2 ELA program, and My View is our 3-5 ELA program. And so their first step, their strategy implementation guide, actually has all of the components that they've split them into must-dos and nice-to-dos in each of the programs. And then what they did to monitor that was they set up these peer reviews. They had peer observations. Teachers went into each other's classrooms to talk about what they saw in the nice-to-dos and must-dos. If there were areas that weren't being hit, then they would kind of collect that data, kind of come back, brainstorm why were those areas not being hit. So this is just kind of another example of some of the work that was done. Middle school, Monty's going to talk to you in a minute. Their work was around iReady, our iReady implementation, and also like how that work is feeding into an MTSS system for academic intervention. And so in his monitoring, you can kind of see like, and he's going to talk a little bit about this, about how they had a plan and then they had to restart their plan this school year, but and how they kind of went through and like detailed some of the work that they needed to do with PD for their staff, and when they were going to analyze the data. And then the last one that I just kind of wanted to show as some of the monitoring that we used was, so this, you can kind of see the high school staff utilized, like their monitoring actually sort of kind of doubled as their school leadership team agenda. So you can see some of like their data that they put in here, the different data that they were looking at. So there's like student data in there, but there's also staff data from surveys that they used, and then questions that they had for one another, and kind of their approach that they were using to address whether the issue came up in the data from the students or from the staff. So just three pieces, three artifacts that I kind of wanted to share with the group. And I did them from all of our buildings, even though there's just two presenting, because I wasn't sure the audience on the call today, just to see them from all levels. So before I turn it over to the buildings, I don't know, Hilda, if it's okay if I stop here to ask for if there's any questions that.
It's whatever you like. It's whatever you.
So I'll just pause it if there's any questions that the people have for me at the district level. I'd be glad to answer them before we move on to Edgewood.
I know, Allison, I was asked about this presentation. You shared everything with Dave, so we have it in our main dashboard.
Oh, okay.
So
Perfect.
if you have, yeah, Dave linked, we had the Dearborn one, and then we have the Fruitport one. So everything is linked there. So if you're looking for any of these resources, I think that's where it's linked in there.
Perfect. Okay, I don't think I see any, so I'm going to turn it over to Emily. Emily Bassi, as I said before, is our assistant principal at Edgewood Elementary, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her to talk to the group about their process.
Great, thanks, Allison. Good morning. So as Allison had mentioned, we have been going through this instructional council structure, and it has really afforded us the opportunity to make sure that we're giving this the time and space that we need to give in order for it to be successful for our continuous improvement of our school. So as far as Edgewood goes, we are the largest of the 3 elementaries in our district. We are K-5 building. We do house our 2 regional ASD program classrooms, as well as a transitional kindergarten classroom here. And then besides those classrooms, we have 4 sections of each grade level K-5 with approximately 100 students per grade level. We have an amazing team at Edgewood. So we have myself, our principal, we have a school social worker who is assigned just to our building, a school psychologist who is assigned just to our building, a behavior specialist. And then in addition to that, we have 25 staff members who are trained in therapeutic crisis intervention, which is just a really, it's an amazing team that we have that has some specific training in response to behavior. Our building is shared on a campus with central office and the middle school and high school. And our PBIS framework is all around Edgewood Rocks. So our rock stars here at Edgewood hear me every day on the announcements talking about how we are going to make it an amazing day and how rock stars show respect and responsibility, have outstanding attitudes, care for our school, and are kind and safe. The strategy was chosen. So as Allison had mentioned, it was kind of coming back from COVID. We wanted to reinvigorate our PBIS. A lot of things had been lost because we had a lot of new staff members coming in. There was a coordinator that had kind of headed up all of the PBIS stuff and had taken charge of all of that. And we had lost that person. During the COVID pandemic, there had to be a lot of creative thinking around COVID mitigation strategies. And so a lot of the things that we had done previously, we weren't able to do anymore. So those things were lost, and then we were able to do them again. So we wanted to figure out how to bring them back successfully, and really just recommitting all staff to the principles of PBIS in our buildings, and really just strengthening our tier 1 and tier 2. So then kind of at the beginning of the year, we met with our staff and we had shared results of the student climate survey that in the family climate survey that had gone out in the spring of the previous year. And there was a lot of power to the data that came from those surveys, because it showed how people were feeling. It was just the perceptions of our students and families. And so we used those results to really drive what our focuses were going to be for the school year. We had a staff survey that we had sent out about PBIS and about how staff members were using common language around PBIS. If staff were using the zones of regulation, and we have a caring school community curriculum. And we just wanted to get an idea of kind of what our baseline was with where staff were using those PBIS tier 1 instructional strategies. And then we really laid our groundwork for our MTSS work and how PBIS fits into that. So at the beginning of the year, we kind of just gave general updates about PBIS to staff. One thing that had come out of the student climate survey was that we wanted to figure out a way to recognize more students for their positive behavior. We had previously had like a student of the month or a rock star of the month, and a rock star of the week, where they draw their A teacher draws a name from their rocks tickets. And we just were finding that students from our climate survey were feeling like we weren't able to recognize enough students for their positive behavior. And so that kind of drove our work into looking into, well, how many students do we have that really are following the expectations consistently? And how can we recognize more students? So we did a lot of work around that. And then we really just, one goal for the school year was we wanted staff to be using the same common language and vocabulary around behavior across grade levels so that it was consistent for students. So using the zones of regulation vocabulary, green zone, blue zone, red zone, yellow zone, and talking about your toolbox and what things you have in your toolbox to help you get to green zone. We use vocabulary around brain research. So talking about students using their wise owls, or if their guard dog was barking, what are some strategies they can use for that? So we just outlined that common vocabulary around behavior. And then we've had significant work going into maintaining that common vocabulary being used throughout this school year, which I'll talk about in a minute. So with all of that, the climate surveys really helped with creating greater staff buy-in regarding Tier 1 behavior instruction. So when you see the data of students' needs and how students were feeling, that really helped create this buy-in that staff, we all needed to be on board with doing things to help improve our PBIS Tier 1 in our building. Another thing that I think is really important that happens now is we do regular behavior data share outs. I also did a presentation to our students at the beginning of the year and in the middle of the year, just to talk to them about behavior. You know, we do it so often and we're so cognizant of it when we're talking with students about our learning targets and academic goals. And sometimes we forget to do that with behavior. So that is one thing that I wanted to do with students, is really give them some learning targets and success criteria for behavior at the beginning of the year, so that they could keep that kind of in their mind and set goals for themselves as far as their behavior goes. We talked to them openly about making mistakes and how we, you know, as teachers, we have to monitor and we do these things to make sure that they're learning how to read and they're learning how to do math, but we also keep track of how they're doing with their behavior. And so explaining just to students about our system for that, so that it's just pretty transparent, the system. So we do have regular behavior data share outs with the staff that happens monthly. I just have a document that I use that kind of goes through a macro view of our school-wide data. And then we have a PBIS data committee that meets monthly, and we look at that macro school-wide data to determine different focuses and different things that we need to either present to our students or challenge them with. We have a kind of going from the macro now, narrowing it down a little bit. We have a Tier 2 team that meets weekly, and we review all of our behavior data. It's a joke in there. It's next to it. It says Diamond Dogs. If you've seen Ted Lasso, they're like the group that meets to solve these problems. And so our Diamond Dogs meet weekly, and we look at that behavior data. We identify students who are in need of Tier 2 intervention, and we make plans with teachers. If we have another system called SOS that goes out in a weekly staff email, teachers are able to send an SOS to our Tier 2 team if they just need to brainstorm, or if they have specific concerns around a student. So our Tier 2 team then meets with that teacher, and we create a document to help figure out any interventions that might be able to go into place for that student. And so teachers have that as a way of getting students into a tier 2 type intervention if the data supports that. And then also when we meet weekly as a tier 2 team to review the behavior data, if we are noticing that a student's data indicates that they need an intervention, we are able to plan around that student and put in some interventions there. That's also another time when we review students who are already in tier 2 that we can kind of look at their progress and do some progress monitoring to see how interventions are impacting their behavior. As I mentioned, we have that PBIS data committee. We also have another committee that's around PBIS, and that's the Climate and Culture Committee. They do a lot of fun things. So planning our Rockstar of the Month assemblies, planning any school-wide celebrations. We have a Rocks ticket tube. It's a big clear tube in the office that kids come down when they're chosen as the Rockstar of the week. They bring their bucket of Rocks tickets down and they get to put it into the tube. And when the tube is full, as a school, we've all worked together to get that tube full. So we get to have a fun celebration. So those are things that we do with that committee. Both committees end up looking at the climate and at the climate surveys, which we are just getting ready now to send out a climate survey for this year. So we are going to be having that sent out before spring break so that we have the opportunity to review that data before the end of the school year and to go into the next school year. As I had mentioned about the common vocabulary, our amazing behavior specialist has created a weekly video series for students around tier 1 behavior instruction. And she's given an interactive component in those videos where there's an optional activity. And then she chooses a classroom every other week to earn the Wise Owl Award, which is a really cute little stuffed animal owl that gets to hang out in their classroom for responding to the video series. And so that has been a really great thing. Our next step with that video series is to share it out with families. So we want families then to be able to continue the same vocabulary at home with their students. There's also lots of fun pictures of all of our students on those, so they look forward to seeing if they've made the video for the week. Another thing that was a big project that we had worked on starting last year was the creation of our noon supervisor handbook. So our noon supervisors, we know that looking at our data, a lot of our behavior referrals were coming from the playground, and that is where our noon supervisors really are instrumental in helping us carry out PBIS. So we created a handbook that helped outline some conscious discipline strategies, and then just gave them some general guidelines so that we can help maintain consistency with proactive strategies toward behavior and also response to behavior. One other thing that's new this year is we do have a Facebook page for our school, and we use that Facebook page to really share a lot of positive behavior information with students and families and with our community. So we are really fortunate this year. We've gotten a lot of good community partnerships to help us with rewarding students. When I had talked earlier about wanting to recognize a larger number of students, one thing that came out of that was our Shining Star Awards. So every month, students who have not received a behavior referral receive a Shining Star Award. And the Shining Star is a certificate that just goes home. It's a simple piece of paper, but for every 3 that a student gets, they are able to get a prize from one of our community partners. So they've gotten slushies, and we have kids meals from Texas Roadhouse. And then every student who receives a Shining Star that month gets put into a drawing, and we have one student from every grade level per month that gets to have a Happy Meal lunch. So that is a big deal for the kids. They get really excited and they want to know if they are going to be getting a Shining Star Award that month. So that's one thing that I think has been really good with the Facebook page, is I'm able to share with parents like, hey, this month I'm giving out 487 Shining Star Awards. We had 487 kids who didn't get a behavior referral this month. So really just being able to recognize that most of our students are consistently doing the right thing. One other component that is important is that we have new staff, like I had mentioned at the beginning, and we wanted to make sure that those new staff members get the appropriate training that they need for success with PBIS. So we have all of our new teachers attend CHAMPS training, and then we have staff within the building who help kind of train on 5 C's. So those are some components that we use there. And then, so through our monitoring, I think if we can go on to the, oh, here, next steps. So yeah, if you just want to go to the next steps. Yeah, thank you. So we definitely still have work to do. And it's a work in progress. It's going to be a work in progress, I think, for some time, but we want to be able to continue providing clear expectations for the caring school community, social emotional learning curriculum that we've been using, and that behavior instruction. You know, just lots of reminders to teachers on how those resources are to be used, modeling and reminding about using the common vocabulary. Like I said, one of our next steps is to administer those climate surveys. We want to do the TFI again for Tier 1 and Tier 2 this spring. And then our continuous improvement team that meets once a month has been going through that strategy implementation guide that Allison shared earlier, just to help us know where we are on that rubric of gold standard versus acceptable variation. And then once we have the TFI results, obviously digging deeper into that to work through our barriers and challenges. So some of our successes that we have had with the implementation of this is that we are seeing academic gains and growth there. We had some really noticeable growth in our mid-year assessment, which was really positive for teachers and for all of us to see. We are super excited that we have a right-sized triangle for behavior in my monthly data share outs. I always kind of share that what our triangle looks like. So Allison, I don't know if you can click on that link. That will just show, yep. So this is just a piece of that data that I share out, and it shows the percentage of students who did not receive a referral, the percentage who received 1, then anywhere between 2 and 9, and then the red is 10 or more. So we've got that triangle that is right sized. And then I think this next link is probably what I'm, one of the things that I'm most proud of. During continuous improvement, we sat down and we really just talked about what is PBIS in our building. And we were able to go through and really list out all of the things that we're doing in Tier 1. What does that look like? Tier 1, all of the things that were happening Tier 2, and kind of that in between of when students are flowing between one and another, and then down to Tier 3. And then I've already talked about the Shining Star Awards, but we really are, I think as a building, there's some good momentum and feeling success this year. So as I mentioned, kind of some challenges that we're working through are just overcoming some TFI barriers. We are finding that as we're looking at the gold standard for things using our monitoring documents, we are doing so many good things, but they have to be documented. So just really taking the time, making the time and space to document the great things that we're doing, to get them down on paper, because if they're not written down, they didn't happen, right? So we want to make sure that we're getting all of that documented. Working through, with a large staff like we have, there are different personal philosophies about behavior, different thresholds for what's a referral and what's not. So having continuous conversations about that and figuring those things out. We have some staff members that are more fluid in our building. So with noon supervisors or IAs, making sure that new people are getting the training that they need and that we're able to have consistent responses to behavior. We are noticing one thing that we want to work on is that there is a disproportionate amount of referrals for boys versus girls. So what can we do kind of tier one even to support our boys in our building? And then looking at repeat areas of behavior or areas of behavior that seem to be the highest number of referrals. We want to be focusing in on those. And then just as far as training for our staff goes, as for preventative steps to mitigate threats of violence. So that's something that I think every school is probably working on a little bit, are just, really thinking about the threats of violence and how we can mitigate those things. So are there any questions on any of that information? Okay.
Okay, I don't think I see any. So this, these 15, 20 minutes on slides make it sound like it was like an easy amount of work that the team at Edgewood has done, and it has been quite the opposite. And Emily, thank you so much for your presentation, but this is an incredible amount of work that this team has done over the last 2 years, and super proud of the work, just super proud. I know we're kind of short on time, so I'm going to transition us over to Monty Kelly. He's our principal at our middle school. And he's going to kind of talk you guys through the same process or a similar process that he used, but around iReady for MTSS. So Monty, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Allison. Great job, Emily. Yeah, just glad to be here. Want to give you guys a little snapshot of what we're doing at the middle school. So this is my second year here. I came in last year as my first year, and the idea of MTSS working with iReady was kind of in place with the principal before me. So we just kind of piggybacked from where they started with the conversation and kind of worked through the process. So we are grades 6 through 8. We have approximately 200 students per grade level, about 56 to 60 staff, 38 teachers, and then we have some interventionists and some other people in here. So we obviously principal, we have one assistant principal, a school social worker that is on site, school counselor, student recovery coordinator, kind of helps with some of our behavior and PBIS tier 1 through 3. And then we're on a shared campus. For sake of time, I'm going to kind of move kind of quick so we can get into some of the nuts and bolts, but we do house with our ESU, we have our MOSI program as well for special ed. And then we, for PBIS, we're the Trojan way, which is respect, responsibility, and integrity. And we did work around this this year as well. We switched from an older model and moved over to this model. And then our departments, ELA, math, science, social studies, related arts. We have art, PE, computers, Spanish, and shop. All right, so our strategy was really using iReady data to increase working with our reading and our math. So that was our main focus on what can we do with using iReady to really increase achievement, kind of in lieu of what was going on with COVID, and then how do we implement that, with fidelity throughout the building. So we kind of chose this. It was something new. hoping it was not just a snapshot assessment. I know some districts use it more as a common assessment, but we actually have the program where we have students on their pathway. Our goal was to increase time on task. Students were not necessarily completing the desired 60 minutes per week. So we had a lot of behavior issues around that. Also getting staff buy-in. So we try to, look at the data as far as student growth and goal setting to try to let the data kind of drive some of those conversations. But we definitely ran into some issues throughout that last year going into this year. So one way that we try to increase, buy-in was trying to get students bought into the idea that we want to make growth. So we incentivize some things, and one of our big incentives that we did last year, the teacher goal really didn't happen in the same way. We incentivized through some goal setting with the classes, where teachers had incentives or maybe earn a pizza party or things like that, but it wasn't what it says here. But we did work through the diagnostic growth goal. So to increase scale score for math and reading, they got a ticket. If they exceeded or met their typical growth, they would get their name in a ticket, and then meet or exceed stretch growth. So basically, the more that they're making growth, and they get their name drawn in, and we did $100 gift cards, but basically they could pick out something on Amazon, and we kind of went through that. So that was something that we continued with, but there were some structural issues. So we weren't getting the bang for our buck on what we were hoping with that. We actually saw a drop in our data towards the spring, and try to do a lot of reflection and trying to move forward. So again, this is just, we also wanted kids to be logging their 30 minutes of reading and math. And the model that we had last year was what I need now, a WIN class, so more advisory, homework, whatever you want to call it throughout the state. And within that time, that's when they were logging that time. So 2 days a week would be spent specifically on reading, 2 days a week was on math. And it was a little funky in the fact that it's at the end of the day. It was the last 20-25 minutes of the day. It was tough for kids to just all of a sudden get their Chromebook out and let's move on this. So we had a lot of behavior issues, and the data just wasn't ideal. So we decided that we probably need to look at something else. So keeping them motivated, a lot of behavior during that time. And then again, it's also the very end of the day. So what we decided to do was to eliminate WIN time from the schedule. We moved iReady to the core classes. We did an iReady PD. We did some intervention changes. This is just a snapshot of the major changes which we did, which is tough to be able to say which change got which outcome, but it was one of those things you kind of have to build down the walls to build a house. And so we decided we're tear down the walls to build a house, and that's kind of what we did. So by eliminating WIN, we surveyed teachers, had a lot of input from just what we were seeing on the daily basis. So we decided to make a task force to kind of look at what our options are. And we reached out to some of the other buildings in the district as well, and just kind of what this looks like. And then schedule changes, there's a lot involved with that. There's parents that we contacted, just food services, but basically we changed our whole daily schedule. We went from the same start and end time, but we went from a 6-period day with this WIN time to just a 6-period day. We reallocated that time back to those classes, which gave us a new set of challenges to kind of navigate, but it really gave us more to work with, and it's gone pretty smoothly. So go ahead, Allison. So by really the core of what we're talking about is moving what we're doing with iReady back to the core classes, hopefully with more ownership and fidelity. It felt like this other thing when we were doing it in WIN. And I know through the MTSS process that we're looking at in our district, that's always an option about having a separate intervention class, which could work where our building was. It was just not where we needed to be. So we decided to move it back to math and ELA. So they have extra time in their classes, and they're still getting those 30 minutes. Each department's kind of figured out what that looks like. And each department's kind of gone their own angle of how they're motivating students. But they are attaching participation points to the grades within ELA. Math is a little bit more focused on lesson progression, and there's incentives for students to get little tickets. We also, through PBIS, we have a place called the Trojan Zone, which is more of a rec room that students can earn through iReady and through other PBIS options to get in that zone, and that's increased a lot of buy-in. So we've just done a lot of cultural changes within the building. So by doing this, less behavioral concerns, and then immediate interventions from the teacher, instead of it feeling, because some of the WIN teachers didn't even have these kids specifically in class other than just that. So it just didn't have the same fidelity that it does now. So I feel like I'm racing, but I'm trying to get through. So one of our iReady PDs, we worked with instructional tools for kind of the next steps of what teachers can utilize within the program. And then progress monitoring bi-weekly. And then I've been sending out data reports now. This is something new that, again, through the process of what we're doing with our instructional council, another building was sharing that they were sending out a weekly update with their weekly connect. So I added that to my report the last few weeks. Snow days threw it off a little bit, but no one's counting. But it does show kind of our progression of lessons passed, percentage passed, and then time on task as well. So the interventionist, so we have a reading and a math interventionist. During COVID, they were spending a lot of time working with our students that were online, with our virtual students. And then we've gone to a different model this year that really freed up our interventionists to to do things differently. And so we had a lot of meetings just talking about how can we tighten up some of our processes and best utilize those two people. We also hired a new interventionist with a big data background. I came from Colorado a few years ago, and we had a kind of a different model where with the interventionists, and I think COVID just changed it for a lot of people. So kind of looked at how can we best utilize our interventionists. And so what we did, we basically have two models where they do have small groups for intervention that are more focused on 2 grade levels below. So they look at iReady data, they look at state testing data, teacher input, parent input, and within those 2 grade levels below, they may have a C or lower, and then they have small groups that they may see twice a week for those small groups. And then we kind of started to see that we're spending a lot of time on students that are a couple of grade levels below, which are our bubble kids that can we easily push back into the green. But then we have these students that are 3 to 4 grade levels below that might not be on an IEP, maybe eventually, but they're not there yet. So we feel like there's this big gap where we're spending a lot of time with these interventions on these students, but there's some kids that are falling through the gap. So we piloted a program this year called the Academic Recovery Course, or the ARC, for reading and math. We just started this. It's in place of an elective class where a student, if they're 3 to 4 grade levels below, they have a C or lower in that content area, math or ELA. And based on teacher recommendation, they would be placed into this intervention class for a quarter. We're starting with just 6th grade. It's kind of our pilot program. I'm hoping to see more of intensive intervention. And we have a couple of different curriculums that you might see up here. If it shows the next one, Allison. Nope, I left that one out. So anyways, we use a couple of curriculums to kind of address those students. So here's some of the success that we're seeing. So what you're seeing from winter to winter, so that'd be last year to right now. We increased, we want to see obviously more in the green, less in the red. Yellow can fluctuate. So increase from 25 to 26. This is for math. Yellow 40, 39, and then red kind of stayed the same. Go ahead, Allison. And then this is reading. So we went from 33 to 38 last year to now, decreased a little in the yellow, and then 41 to 37. So seeing some growth there for winter to winter. And then this as well. So this is our progress towards annual typical growth. Allison, you might do a better job of explaining the growth part.
Yeah, for sure. So the previous slides will showed achievement, right? So they showed the number of kids that were on grade level, just below grade level, or well below grade level. These iReady measures both achievement and growth. So each kid, when they take the test in the fall, they get a growth target. And what these two charts show for math and for reading will show how many kids are on track to meet their typical growth at the end of the year. So 100% means they made a year's worth of growth. This is a mid-year benchmark. We want this number to be over 50% because we're over 50% of the year. So last year, kids were at, our median kid had made 59% of the progress toward their growth goal. This year, that's up to 62%. And then in reading, huge growth in the area of reading in particular. last year, 78% along that path. And right now, our median kid, so the kid right in the middle, has already made over a year's worth of growth in the area of reading.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. And so then this is winter to winter as well. And this is much more of the, so that was the achievement data. This is just the growth data. So our green again from 25 to 26 for math, and then yellow 40 to 39, and red was about the same for math. But our reading data from winter to winter does look a little different. So our 33 to 38, 26 to 25, and decrease 41 to 37. So some pretty big things, and we actually went over this as a staff today to celebrate this. I really complimented our team on being willing to have the tough conversations that what we're doing isn't working and we need to kind of start over. And it was a big process, but by doing that, we really are seeing some substantial changes, even, you know, behavioral with the students, and teachers are more bought in. It presents new challenges. How do we motivate some of the teachers that aren't in iReady every day anymore? So how do we still, you know, navigate through some of that? So it's been awesome. We went through the data today, kind of delve into it where they're looking into their specific classes. And again, baseline to right now, we saw a lot of growth, and then incrementally, who knows where we go, because we made so many substantial changes right now. But at the end of the day, we're going to hopefully keep seeing, you know, fidelity within the whole process.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ramonte. I really appreciate it. So both Edgewood and the middle school represented what I would consider like a real experience with this, right? So they, of course, no one's going to highlight where things kind of went wrong, but in both buildings, the first year of implementing these new strategies didn't go as planned. Like they were doing all of the right things, but when they got to the end of the year, their data wasn't where they wanted to be. And so what you heard mostly was them talking about how they've used that data, that monitoring process, and the collective genius of their school improvement teams to make changes that have really showed up in pretty remarkable ways when you consider they made their changes at the beginning of this school year, and like in the data that the middle school is showing how it's already showing up, even though we're only midway through this school year. So, and Edgewood, even though they've chosen a PBIS goal, they know that the data that I'm looking at mostly across the district is that academic goal. And so that was definitely a barrier, or like a mind shift that they had to have, that we do PBIS systems and we look at behavior data, but the purpose of that, right, is so that kids feel this engagement and this connection to school, so they eventually have, you know, solid academic outcomes. And both of the buildings that spoke today have, like I said, in one semester shown pretty significant improvements in where they were from last winter to this year. So just want to highlight again, I said it at the end of the Edgewood, but for the middle school as well, like it's been a bumpy road, but they have been diligent and worked hard with their data and their teams to make the improvements that they've needed to this school year. So super proud of their work. So that is the end of what Fruitport has for the team or for the people on the call, but we're willing to answer any questions that Hilda or anyone else has for us.
No, that was great. Thank you to everyone who presented. That was interesting. It's always good to see a different perspective. So I appreciate you sharing that. I know there was one question in the chat, and I don't know if it got answered. I think about one of these surveys, the climate survey, if you don't mind sharing that. It says, yeah, would you mind? It was Jody from Grand Blanc. She asked if you don't mind sharing the student climate survey that you used.
Sure. We were in Project Safe, which was a grant that our ISD had gotten. And so we had used a student climate survey from, I want to say it was from the University of Connecticut. Anyway, they took that and they made it into a Google form. And I'm willing to share. Hilda, do you want me to? It would take me a minute to get it right now, but if I gave it to Dave, would he be able to get it?
We'll link it in the dashboard. And I was just going to say, if you were interested, I'm going to bring up the dashboard again with the links. But yes, today's presentation with everything else that Allison and her team, you know, alluded to is all linked in there as well. So I know it's always helpful to go back and revisit and really dig in there. So yeah, definitely you can share it with Dave and we'll add it on there.
Perfect.
What other questions do you have? Anybody else wondering, things you're thinking about? All right, well, before we wrap up today, I am going to, I'm actually gonna go and switch screens if that's okay, Allison.
Yes,
and
please
bring.
do. Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the dashboard, so give me 1 second here. Get out of my presentation.
Hey, Hilda.
Yes, hi, Dad, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. I don't have a question or anything. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. This has been seriously absolutely amazing. It was like a great confirmation for some of the work that we've been doing, but also just to see like how the systems are being developed is like awesome for us because we were struggling to figure out, where do we start? How do we, where do we begin? And a lot of it for us is systemic issues. And just the fact that you guys are so open and willing to share this to all of you has just been absolutely amazing for all of us out there. So I know others are probably thinking the same thing, but I needed to put this out there. Like, thank you to Fatima, to you, to Allison, to everyone that shared out the information. This has been absolutely incredibly helpful. And I sighed a sigh of relief. So I appreciate you
Oh,
guys.
good. Well, I'm glad. I know we're always so worried we're gonna overwhelm. Because believe me, we get it. We all have, been through that. So we understand, and nothing is perfect. It's definitely a work in progress and we're moving that way. But, it's constantly just recognizing, hey, this is working. This is not, what can we do? And Monty brought up that point. They recognize their win time. Something was not working. What are we going to do? It's having just that realization that it's okay, and we'll go there. So thank you to everybody. I did put the link to the dashboard in the chat again. If you don't mind, before you leave today, and I will show my screen so you can see, sign out, especially if you need sketches. And then if you scroll down there midway, you'll see the Dearborn dashboard with all our presentation and our links. The Fruitport presentation is there for you to access, and then all the good stuff that Dave did in his session. But if you keep on going there, you'll see feedback at the top of page 2. Please visit the Jamboard and give us your feedback. What did you like? What didn't you like? What takeaways? What questions do you have? We really do look at that. And the feedback survey is there for you to complete as well. So I appreciate having everybody on today's call. Like I said, Dave, Mike, and I Dave put so much time into this. Mike and I are just really making sure that, we can support as best as possible, putting all these great minds together. But we love having it. Like I said, we're always learning. So, I'll hang around if you have any questions, but just make sure you sign out. Make sure you give us the feedback. And we will see everybody in 2 weeks. And if you've got suggestions for that last session, please include that on the feedback, because Dave did mention a couple of topics, but we're always open to something else if there's new wonderings that you might have. So thanks again for being here, everybody, and have a great afternoon. Go ahead and stop the recording.